3:12 a.m., and the ceiling has more roads than a map. I count the cracks anyway, 1, 2, 20 until the numbers blur and the house starts breathing like it's tired of me. The orange bottle rattles in my palm, a tiny maraca, with no music left, empty. The pharmacy is dark as a closed eye. The doctor's line answers with a machine that talks like a pillow. In the drawer, a foil sheet waits with a last, lonely circle. The backup they say you should never need. My hand hovers, storm outside, storm inside, lightning sketches the sink in bones. The clock refuses to apologize. The chair by the window looks like a promise I haven't tried. I put the foil on the counter and walk to the window. The streetlight floats in the rain like a halo that forgot its saint. I choose the chair by the glass, the chair without the bottle pull, a blanket over my knees, and listen to the roof drum out its rough lullaby. My fingers find the edge of the foil, then let go. I breathe once, twice. I set the pill down and told the doc, if sleep is honest, it will come in daylight. Tonight we're talking about 20 years of just one pill, and the single night I finally slept without it. I'm telling you this the way I wish someone told me, plain steady, without shame. I have receipts, dates, and a plan with my name on it. I also have compassion for the woman I was at 3 a.m. If you're new here, pull up a chair. We keep our voices low and our paperwork clear. We make no decisions after dark. We read twice. We speak plain, and if a system is louder than your heartbeat, we invite witnesses and open the blinds. If family stories like this matter to you, subscribe and tap like. I share new grandma stories morning and evening, because some nights are long and some mornings need hope. Before you judge that bottle, you need to know what nights used to mean in this house. For me, the lamp tilts the way my wrist remembers, just enough to fold the light into a small pond on the table. The kettle begins its soft river song. Steam tests the air like a hand at a doorway. I set the pill bottle on the cork coaster so it will not leave a ring. As if manners could tame medicine, the glass waits beside it, water poured to the pencil line we drew years ago for nights just like this. A spoon rests on a folded napkin, obedient as a bookmark. I am careful, because care keeps a house, under the bread tin. The sticky note lives where I tucked it after another difficult season. Daylight decides. I do not need to read it to know its shape. I smoothed the tin anyway, the way you smooth a child's hair at the bus stop, and feel the paper's small backbone answer my palm. Routine is not a prison. It is a fence that keeps the goats from the roses. I move inside it, grateful. 2 cups come from the cupboard by muscle memory, 1 for tea, 1 for water. I set them both, then lift the tea back to the shelf. Habit and boundary nod at each other like old neighbors across a hedge. The refrigerator clicks. The furnace clears its throat. Somewhere down the block, a late bus inhales and decides we are not its concern. The clock on the wall, a gift from a retired conductor, ticks with the authority of rails underweight. I open the window an inch to hear the weather pronounce its verdict. Night breathes rain that smells like coins in pavement. The radio on the sill never music after 10 whispers the forecast the way a nurse whispers hallway news. I turn the dial off and listen for my own sentence. Nothing arrives, and that is also an answer. I unscrew the bottle cap, stop, and screw it back. I line the label to the sink's edge, a private truce between order and ache. The second hand on the clock sounds like footsteps leaving, calmed but not sorry. I picture the faces of people I love, like small lamps in distant windows, my grandson's cowlick, my sister's stern mouth bending into a joke. The room is not empty. It is appointed. I touch the sticky note once, as if it were a doorknob that requires consent. Daylight decides. That rule saved me once on the night a hurried kindness almost borrowed tomorrow. The kettle clicks off. Heat leaves the spout in a ribbon that loosens as it rises. I breathe with it, counting on my fingers like a schoolgirl learning a hymn. Across the table, the orange bottle glows like a small traffic cone, asking for attention. It is patient, but persuasive. I sit. The chair holds my weight and my hesitation, without choosing sides. In the window I am a faint reflection wearing a house fur shawl. I lift the glass, sip, and place it exactly back on the ring it left yesterday. I can feel the evening negotiating with me, gently, firmly, like a nurse who knows your chart better than you do. That rule saved me once, and tonight the bottle asked me to break it. I begin the small chores that slow a galloping mind. Stack the mail by size, fold the dish towel so corners kiss, match lids to containers until the wrong ones confess themselves. I run water and watch the stream thin, steady, obedient to gravity instead of fear. I wipe a circle on the table with the heel of my hand until the grain rises like rings on an old tree. The room offers back small satisfactions. Outside, a taxi noses past and leaves a wet signature. Inside, the clock keeps its promises. I turn the lamp a breath brighter for company. I am awake, but not surrendered. Before the pills, there were pews and coffee. We came from a county where church basements smelled like soup and floor wax, where the Union Hall kept minutes in tidy script and the ladies kept casseroles in better order than most men kept their tempers. Mama said, names on every promise, and meant a Trent on the envelope, tithe on the envelope, winter coal on the envelope, your word on your breath. She taught me to count change without looking down and to thank the clerk as if gratitude were part of the price. I met your grandpa at a fish fry where folding chairs complained and hymn numbers leaned crooked on the board. He stood in the doorway 5 minutes early, which is the only way I trust a man to be on time. He carried a pocket New Testament with a corner worn thin, and a small notebook where he wrote dates, oil changes, birthdays. The afternoon we first danced to a tune with no chorus, only a fiddle that remembered what joy could do. He circled things. He didn't underline them. Underlining says, look at me. Circling says, I will return. We courted with bus schedules and borrowed boots. Brass station clocks taught us patience, and ticket windows taught us proof. When a train was late, we ate peanuts and read each other's faces for news. When it was early, we hurried to be the kind of people prepared to be blessed. He kept receipts in his wallet like pressed leaves. I kept a pencil behind my ear like a carpenter with a quiet plan. We were young, already using tools. Insomnia arrived the year we tried to be brave in 2 directions at once over time for him. Night classes for me, a baby on the way, and a car that coughed its opinions at every hill. I lay in bed counting distant freight cars by their whistles, pretending I could measure sleep by steel and timetables. The ceiling became a geography I learned by touch. Warm milk helped until it didn't. Prayer lists helped until the list itself kept me awake. Names turning like pages that refused to close. Mama's rules held as best they could. Write it down, or it didn't happen. We wrote the budget on payday and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like an apple. We wrote apology notes when we forgot kindness, and the date we made up again. We spoke plain even when our voices shook like the screen door in March, but nights lengthened when life stacks itself too high. The baby's fever, the second shift's hollowness, the layoff rumor chewing through supper. Each small thing became a spoon scraping the pot. I walked the block in circles until the mailbox knew my footfall. I tucked lavender into pillowcases, tuned the radio to distant baseball, cracked the window to borrow someone else's breeze. I learned how to fold a sheet so flat you could skate a coin across it. I learned that quiet can be loud, that a clock can argue, that love beside you can't always pull you over the edge into rest. The first time I watched the sun rise without having met sleep at all, I understood why people make bargains in the dark. Your grandpa would circle a hymn number and tap the page, an invitation without a speech. We sang, and sometimes I slept, and sometimes I didn't. But I always knew where the promise lived in the circle, in the showing up. On Sundays the Union Hall smelled like sawdust and decision. On Mondays the factory whistle braided with the church bell and reminded a town to keep its hands in its word. Midwest mornings taught me thrift. Evening trains taught me patience. Brass clocks taught me that time is heavy but not cruel. I believed I could outwork a night. Then came the evening, when later started charging interest when I carried a day's worry across the threshold and found it multiplied by darkness. That was before medicine, before labels, before I learned that help can comfort and complicate in the same breath. We promised to meet at supper always until the night later, learned to charge interest. We kept showing up together. We thought the hard part would be choosing between bills and small joys. It turned out to be sleep. Babies teach clocks new shapes, and grief erases numbers. During those years I became a hallway light, always on, never proud. The doctor was kind and efficient, a man who smelled like wintergreen and read my pulse with his eyes as much as his fingers. Short course, he said. Just 1 pill to break the cycle. Then we'll reset. The first night I swallowed mercy. The second night I swallowed relief. The medicine arrived like a warm blanket folded by someone who knew my name. I let it tuck me in, and I slept as if a door finally remembered how to close. Then the cycle stretched. A refill, because the babies coughed. Another, because the shift changed and the neighborhood fireworks stitched midnight to morning in red thread. Another, because your grandpa's father got sick and the hospital learned our names. Just until things calmed down, We told each other, standing at the sink with the good glasses turned upside down on a towel. Things did not calm down. They rearranged themselves into new reasons. I kept my habits and hid my dependence inside them. The bottle stayed on the coaster so it wouldn't mark the table, as if etiquette could domesticate need. I measured the water to the pencil line like a kind of prayer. I set the alarm to remind me not to decide anything after dark. I read the label twice and practiced the speech I would give. A midnight fear, daylight decides. The first time I forgot a dose. The night became a cliff. My thoughts walked to the edge in their house slippers and peered over, dazzled by distance. I felt my heartbeat count faster than the clock, and the clock refused to help. I gripped the sheet like a rope and promised every saint in the calendar I would be brave tomorrow, if tonight would just be kind. I took the pill with water and felt the verdict soften. I am grateful for help, but I was not blind. I wrote the new rule on a card and slid it under the bread tin. No new decisions after dark. I told no one the worst part. How small my world became at bedtime. How narrow the doorway felt between me and rest. I tucked the bottle away when company came, the way you tuck a loose hair behind your ear before a photograph. On the nights the label changed brands and the capsule looked unfamiliar, I said a blessing over it like food. Help and harm can wear the same color. I learned to tell them apart by how they behaved in daylight. The first pill taught me mercy. The second taught me math. The trouble didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a label. Insurance swapped hands the way strangers pass umbrellas, and the pharmacy smiled with new colors. Same prescription, they said. Different manufacturer. I twisted the cap and saw a capsule that looked like a cousin of what I knew. Same family, different manners. I took it and woke into a morning with corners rubbed off. Coffee tasted like someone else's memory. The hallway tilted a breath to the left, just enough to make my foot doubt the stair. I caught the banister and laughed so I wouldn't cry. Fog, I wrote in the margin of my day. Week 2, the fog learned the map. I miscounted the teaspoons in pancake batter, left my keys in the fridge door, stood in the yard, and could not remember if I had already fed the tomatoes their water. Age, folks love to say, like a shrug that got tenure. No, I thought, this is a new clumsiness. I checked the lot number, the NDC. I checked myself in the mirror and found a woman whose pupils looked like they were keeping a secret from her. The refill reminder pinged. I walked to the counter and slid the bottle across. The clerk typed, then frowned at the screen like it had told a joke it shouldn't. Doctor review required, she said. Looks like your plan flagged it. I stood still because stillness keeps the room from falling off its nails. When I asked, he'll send something. You'll get a call. We both knew that meant later. At supper, I swallowed the last of the cousin capsules and set the empty on the coaster so it could perform its dignity. The phone lit after 10 with a voicemail that dressed itself as concern. Long-term management may be indicated. Recommend taper someday pending follow-up. Someday, the word that steals decades while sounding polite. I called back. Machines answered. I set the phone face down like a misbehaving child. I picked up the bottle to read the label again, to memorize my opponent. The pharmacy had printed a new instruction in a font that didn't blink. Take nightly. Not as needed. Not short course. Nightly, like a rule that never learned my name. I pressed the plastic until it creaked. Nightly is not a suggestion. It's a leash. And I have never walked well on those dots. I stood by the sink, the house, breathing its even breath, and listened to the dark bargain. Take it now, and stop asking questions. Ask questions and see what the night will do to you. I turned the bottle until the warning label looked me in the face and the barcode looked away like a child who knows. The rain ticked the window in Morse I couldn't read. The label wanted my obedience tonight in its terms. Morning invited everyone to have an opinion. Family first. Be reasonable, said my sister on speakerphone. The kind of reasonable that means don't make work for me. Just take it. We all sleep better when you sleep. I love her. I heard the fear hiding under her apron. Daylight decides, I said, and wrote the time of the call in my notebook so the moment would have a witness. The pharmacist offered a bridge dose, his voice packed with calm and policy. We can give you a few to carry you through until the prescriber signs off. Carry me through sounded like being dragged. I'll need my records, I said, surprising us both. Everything you have, dosage history, manufacturer changes, counseling notes, lot numbers. He paused just long enough to respect me. We'll print what we're allowed, he said, and I'll flag what you should request from the clinic. At the mailbox, Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down shared a fistful of herbal stacks like a bouquet. These are natural, she said, And that word did a quick costume change into harmless, which is not what it means. There are a lot of things, I said, but they are not mine. She hugged me with elbows, offended on my behalf, and a little on her own. By noon, I had requests in motion. Release of information to the clinic, prescriber notes, refill logs, prior authorizations. I asked the pharmacy to tag my profile with brand changes going back 2 years. I wrote down names, the tech who printed, the pharmacist who signed, the time the printer jammed, so I would remember not to blame the wrong machine. Paper is my friend when memory gets shy. Then came the afternoon drift. That thin place where shadows stretch and willpower thinks about laying down. The neighbor kid skateboarded past. The rhythm of his wheels made my heartbeat feel late. I took out 2 mugs by habit, tea for work, water for swallowing, and then put one back. I will not turn my kitchen into a clinic. I made broth, slow and noisy, the kind you have to listen to. I put on socks that knew my feet. I stood in sunlight for exactly 8 minutes, like a plant with manners. Before bed, I set my witness appointment: daylight, 2 chairs, a pen that wants to behave. I texted Elaine, the patient advocate I met at church when casseroles were our currency. Can you come sit with me at the clinic? She sent back a thumbs up and then words, because she knows I prefer nouns to drawings. Yes, I'll bring a folder and a fountain pen that scares them into legible. I taped a small card over the pill. Bottle's face. No new moves at night. The bottle did not blink. I moved it to the pantry eye level for a judge, not bedside like a temptation. The day closed itself like a good book, and I thanked it for not adding any new characters. I rinsed my cup, folded the dish towel so edges lined up like soldiers, and let the house hum itself toward dark. The rule straightened its back between me and the bottle, the way a friend steps into a doorway when the wrong person knocks. I set 2 cups down, then took one back. This kitchen would not be a clinic. It's funny who gets offended when you start owning your name. Marla, my walking partner of 15 years, turned our loop into a lesson I didn't sign up for. If you loved your body, she said, breath tidy as her ponytail, you'd trust the pill. This drama is bad for your nerves. We passed the elm with the split trunk and I counted to 5 so I wouldn't use all my words at once. I trusted it for 20 years, I said. Tonight, I'm asking it to earn that trust. After she peeled off, I sat on the front step with my notebook and began to write the log that would keep me honest and keep dismissals from winning. Time of dose, brand, effects: morning, fog, mist stare, metal taste, start time of clear thinking. I added a column for me. What helped besides the pill? Walk, sunlight, warm shower, prayer with both eyes open. 3 pages of nonsense that shook worry out of my wrists. The clinic portal blinked with statements. Refill authorized. Refill denied. A confetti of green and red that explained nothing and everything. I printed 6 months and spread them like quilt squares on the table. Patents announced themselves. So did questions. The brand switch lined up and marched with my morning fog. The mist stare came the same week the label learned to say nightly. Evening slid its shoulders into the house. The on-call nurse texted from a number that refused to introduce itself. Take now, we'll talk tomorrow. That sentence has been the anthem of mistakes since the first garden met the first snake. I stared at it until the letters looked tired of their own posture. I typed back, daylight decides. Please note, refusal and reason. My thumb hovered like a hawk. I hit send and felt both brave and terribly small. In the quiet that followed, memory lit its lantern and walked the corridors of years I thought I had swept. The nights I swallowed a pill for peace and woke with my mouth full of permission I hadn't meant to give. The mornings I accepted fog like rent and paid it with my best hours. The holiday where I nodded through the dessert course because the label said avoid alcohol, and Aunt Cora decided sobriety was a personality flaw. The apology breakfasts after I snapped at your grandpa for breathing ambitious air. I folded the log once, to break its spine into willingness. As I stood to tuck it under the bread tin, the front steps creaked, a sound like an idea arriving without invitation. The house changed key. I put the log down open, because hiding is what trouble asks you to do. I straightened my back the way a seamstress straightens fabric before she cuts. I don't answer doors at night without witnesses, but I do turn on lights. I folded the log once, then the front steps creaked. He's a good man, my nephew, with hands that can fix a hinge and a worry that runs downhill. He stood on the porch with a paper bag that tried to look casual. Auntie, he said, we got you covered. He shook the bag and the night made that small, guilty music of loose pills bumping strangers. No names, he added quickly, but safe. From a friend. Safe is a word that likes to dress up as shortcut after dark. Opened the door just enough for light to leave the house and sit on his face. I made tea, I said, which is what I offer when I am not offering agreement. He stepped in one foot and then remembered his mother raised him right. He waited. We'll talk tomorrow, I said. He glanced past me at the table, at the bottle turned to the wall like a timeout child, at the log with its neat columns. He is not unobservant. Look, he tried again, lowering his voice like we were conspiring with bedtime. If the refill doesn't come through, you don't need to suffer. Everybody says you should just take it. Everybody is a crowded room that cannot produce a single chair with a name on it. I am not suffering, I said, calm like a chalk line. I am waiting with a plan. He shifted the bag from one hand to the other. That sound again, the rattle that knows your weak hours. It's just to get you through, he said, which is something people say when they want to skip the bridge and jump the creek. I put the kettle on so the house could remind us who we were. Steam rose like a soft rebuke. I set 2 cups. I put honey on the saucer, the diplomacy of kitchens. He put the bag on the counter and slid it toward me as if the counter were a conveyor belt and I were machinery that could not refuse the part. I laid my hand on the switch and considered the dark. Then I turned the porch light brighter, a small sun we keep in reserve for teaching. Daylight, I said, and his jaw set into that stubborn gene we share. There are fees for missing windows, he tried, borrowing a banker's tongue. There are fees for missing myself, I answered, and the kettle agreed. He exhaled a laugh with no joke in it. You're so much, he said, which is the compliment some men learned late. You'll be here at 10, I asked, and he nodded. He took the bag back with the face you make when gravity wins. At the door, he kissed my hair. You always were the light switch in this house, he said. Good, I said. Then you know what happens next. He reached for the glass of water on the coaster. Habit more than intention. I reached for the switch and gave the porch the last word. He reached for the glass. I reached for the switch light chose for us. The timer on the pharmacy app turned like a carnival wheel. 48 hours to confirm the auto refill, or lose the slot. A banner blinked act now with the enthusiasm of a marching band. My body answered with a yawn that had teeth. When you owe sleep, even your bones file complaints. I brewed stubborn tea and opened the calendar. Taper, plan empty squares, waiting for ink. Witnesses Elaine on Tuesday, Pastor Childs on Thursday. If we needed a prayer with a clipboard. Second opinion voicemail left at the clinic across town, where nurses write their names big enough for shaky eyes. I stacked consents and releases like pancakes and wrote COPY on each in a grandmother's handwriting that frightens lazy faxes. The app sang, again, confirm, confirm. I moved the phone face down and picked up a pen that knew me better. I wrote my creed fresh, because sometimes the words need to hear themselves in new ink. Daylight decides. I wrote it larger and taped it to the bottle so the label and my law could make eye contact. The house participated. The clock clicked clack like a metronome for courage. The refrigerator hummed a B-flat I pretended was my key. I walked my sleep debt around the kitchen the way you walk a colicky baby, gentle, repetitive, believing the body will remember the road back. I called the pharmacy. I'm declining the auto refill until I review with the prescriber, I said. Silence gathered, then a polite script. You may experience delay. I may experience clarity, I answered. Note my file, patient requests, documented plan, declines, nighttime changes, click. A record exists now. Records are small shields that fit in envelopes. The clinic portal tried to sell me convenience one-click renewals, mail delivery that would arrive when my name was sleeping. I unchecked boxes like I was diffusing something that ticks. I printed the taper guide, the advocate sent, reduce by crumbs, not by courage. Fix wake time, not bedtime. Light in the morning, quiet at night. No new sedatives without a doctor who signs his whole name, where a grandmother can see it. I stood at the window and let dusk become itself. The streetlight came on, not as a warning, but as a routine. I would make a routine out of my freedom. I set the pill organizer on top of the fridge, the high shelf, where I store things I respect but don't consult at midnight. I put a note on the bedroom door. If you are panicked, go have some water and come back with better manners. Then I sat, because sitting is a position of decision. The phone danced its last dance, 24 hours remaining. Let it dance. I counted 4 breaths, the kind you can do with a hymnal, open to the quiet pages. I told my nervous system we were not in a hurry. I told the room it could borrow my patience. If I wait, They'll call me foolish. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. The clinic's glass-walled room made honesty feel like furniture. Sun shouldered through the blinds and drew lines across the table where my patient advocate, Elaine, set her folder like a hymn book. A nurse with kind ankles and a pen that clicked only once introduced herself and sat down as a witness, not a buffer. My bottle stayed zipped in my purse like a talkative cousin at a funeral. The doctor came in with sleeves rolled and a face that looked like it had learned to apologize before coffee. He didn't touch the bottle. He touched the chart. "I've read your notes," he said, tapping the stack. "All of them." He slid a paper toward me, a hypnogram. He called it a picture of sleep I've never seen but have lived inside. "Long-term use can change sleep architecture," he said gently, like he was moving a picture on my mantle to where it belonged. "It helps you fall asleep, but it can thin the deeper stages, that fog you're writing about, especially after the manufacturer swaps that tracks." He showed me my history like a train schedule. Renewal, renewal, brand change, renewal by assumed continuation. There was that phrase, polite and slippery. "We did this to you," he said, meaning the system, and maybe himself. "We made temporary into maintenance without revisiting informed consent." Elaine wrote that down and underlined it once. The nurse laid a one-page plan between us. "We can do this humanely," she said. "Supervised slow taper crumbs, not cliffs. CBTI routines, wake time fixed, light in the morning, no negotiating with your pillow. Prescribing cleanup every renewal with a fresh, dated discussion. Regular check-ins weekly at first, then bi-weekly. You won't be alone." Alone is the word insomnia whispers when it wants to win. I read the plan the way Mama read contracts, tracing each line with a finger that belonged to every woman in my family who ever signed her name to keep a house upright. "No auto-renewals," I said. "Each step in letters big enough for a tired grandmother." The nurse smiled like someone who has been waiting to be asked to do her job properly. The doctor acknowledged the brand substitution history with a grown man's regret. "We'll stabilize on one formulation long enough for you to know which voice is yours," he said. "Then we'll start shaving the edges. It may be months. It should be. Anyone who promises days is selling theater." Elaine slid me a pen that scared the page into legible. "We'll get your consent on each change and you'll get copies," she said, almost to the room as much as to me. The nurse added a handout with boxers that begged to be checked in pencil. "Wake time, morning light, no screens after 9, bed is only for sleep and saints." I looked up through the glass at the hallway where people carried their fatigue in paper, gowns and denim jackets. I thought of the nights I treated oblivion like mercy and fog like rent. I thought of the word nightly printing itself across 2 decades like a stamp that had lost its conscience. "I'm not brave," I told them, "the way you confess to someone who has already forgiven you. I'm tired and I can read." The doctor nodded. "Reading is a form of bravery," he said. "So is waiting. We signed the beginning, not the end." The nurse stamped the date as if it mattered, which makes it matter. Elaine tucked the copies in her folder, and one in mine, then looked over her glasses to see if I was still there. I am, what they called maintenance, was a shortcut around my dignity. Plans cost paper and courage, and sometimes they cost people who preferred you drowsy. I set the kitchen table like a workbench and began to assemble the proof of my intention. Medication log times, brands, results, side notes about dreams that felt like errands, and mornings that felt like fog. Refill history dates, lot numbers, the month the capsule looked like a cousin with bad manners. Side effect Daiichi stumbles, circled in red. The day I put salt in coffee and laughed, then cried. Fall incident notes, nothing broken, but pride scuffed on the 3rd stair. I taped a square of sandpaper there as an apology to myself. I printed insurance approvals. And the taper calendar the nurse gave me months, not weeks, each reduction small enough to measure in grace. I labeled a folder check-ins and another sleep hygiene so that the house could learn our new language. I taped a sign by the stove, no pill talk after 6 p.m. notes only, daylight discussion. At first I wrote it for visitors, then I realized it was mostly for me. Elaine called to say she'd color-coded the plan, and that color can be a kind of kindness. The pharmacist faxed manufacturer data like recipes, precise and fussy. The doctor's office sent a portal message with bullet points that behaved themselves. Each ally required a phone call that sounded calmer than I felt, a small chip spent from the account of relationships. People like you better when you nod. I practiced stillness instead. In the afternoon, I packed a night kit for honest midnights. Chamomile, a breathing card in 4/4, hold for 4, out for 6, a pen and index cards to pour racing thoughts into the drawer, wool socks that remember my ankles, and a chair by the window that knows the shape of a woman waiting without apology. I moved the pill organizer to the high shelf, not out of sight, just out of reach of panic. Panic can climb, let it exercise. I will not, I told the family chat. I'm tapering, no surprises, no deliveries, copies on request. Hearts bubbled up like warm dishwater. One thumbs down floated there too, a disagreement that didn't have the courage to speak. That's fine. We had agreed the rule would stand even when applause did not. Then I wrote a sentence on the inside cover of my log the way you sew a name into a child's coat. I can do hard things when they're written down. I signed it and dated it because dates are fences around promises. I slid the pen into the spiral and closed the book with a small, private ceremony. The last paper left to sign was the one to start. I held the pen and saw the next months like a road in winter plowed. Not bare, but passable if you keep the line. I thought of the chair by the window, the high shelf, the wool socks, the daylight names in my phone. The pen touched down. One signature could end this, or end me. The heat didn't roar. It multiplied. Family launched a poll without ballot boxes. Why make it dramatic? My cousin messaged, period heavy as a sigh. An old friend delivered a mason jar of natural sedatives that smelled like a meadow plotting a coup. Just a splash, she said, as if my liver were a suggestion. I lined the jar on the back stoop for the moon to counsel, and let the night decide what to do with it. At the grocery, someone I barely knew patted my hand the way people pat Cass. You don't have to be a hero, she said. I wanted to say, I am not. I'm a secretary taking minutes from my own body. Instead, I nodded and wrote the time we spoke on a receipt. Paper is the ledger that keeps stories from inflating. I took myself to the diner that keeps its lights honest and its eggs unconfused. The waitress poured coffee and didn't ask why I wanted it decaf. I spread my rules on the formica like maps. Read twice, speak plain, no new decisions after dark. I unfolded my receipts and traced the thin road from maintenance to consent. I whispered grace over the page, the kind that corrects without humiliating. The clink of forks and the hiss from the grill tuned my nerves to a key I could sing. Elaine slid into the booth, a folder under her arm, her eyes bright with unstartled belief. I confirmed with the Advocate Network, she said. Taper must be gradual. Consent must be informed. Alternatives documented. Sleep hygiene is medicine, not a hobby. The doctor agrees. The pharmacist agrees. Now we put the plan in a room with their names and ours. I breathed out and watched the paper not move. They'll call me stubborn, I said. They'll call you steady, she corrected. Let's schedule the joint meeting. Doctor, pharmacist, me, you. The nurse wants in. She's the engine, anyway. We set the time in daylight. We wrote it down where ink could hold it. We ordered pie because ritual deserves dessert. On the way home, the rumor thread tried to braid itself around my ankles. Voicemails that ended in ellipses. A message that confused boundary with punishment. I set the phone face down and let my house answer. The lamp lit the corner where my night kit waited. The chair by the window didn't blink. The pill bottle wore its taped creed like a sash dot. I turned the thermostat up 1 degree, the symbolic kind that Bodhis understand. I set my wake alarm for the same time as yesterday. I washed my cup and listened to the water insist on down. I thanked the day for holding. I thanked myself for not negotiating in the currency of panic. If they won't sit with grace, I will sit with God and the copy machine, and the nurse with the pen that clicks once, and a plan that knows my name. 3 in the morning is a hallway with too many doors. I picked the one with the table lamp and the kettle. Because metal and water remember order when I don't. The house wore its winter hush. I set the bread tin to one side and pulled a legal pad into the circle of light. If night insists on visiting, it can bring a clipboard. I wrote my terms in blunt pen, each line a rung on a ladder. Supervised taper. No cliffs. Only crumbs. No new sedatives without documentation. I can read in tired eyes. CBTI practices wake at the same time. Light in the morning. Bed for sleeping and for saints. Nothing else. Weekly. Check-ins. Doctor, pharmacist, advocate. Dates with signatures. Copies for every change. If it isn't on paper, it's a bedtime story. The pen scratched like a cricket in August. I signed my name as if I owned the house, and I do. Then, I built a night kit the way a captain packs a lifeboat. Calm and thorough. Chamomile in a small jar. A breathing carton for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. Clipped to a ribbon. warm socks, as soft as apologies, and the chair by the window where a woman can wait without surrendering. I set a glass of water on the coaster with the respect usually reserved for guests. On the fridge, I taped the taper calendar and a list titled What to Do Before You Ask the Bottle. Wash face, drink water, read 2 pages of something old, write 3 lines of gratitude with plain nouns and no adjectives, stand on the porch and let night count you in. There is nothing mystical about it. It is just practice, the way a field learns its rows. I walked the house once, saying goodnight to hinges and the faithful hum behind the walls. In the bedroom I smoothed the sheet until it shone like a lake at dusk and opened the window a finger to let the honest dark in. My hands trembled, so I made them busiest at the mail by size, squared the rug to the floorboard line, folded the towel so corners met like cousins at a reunion. Back at the table, I wrote a note to the part of me that bargains. We are not quitting, we are choosing, we are not brave, we are steady, daylight decides. I tucked it under the bread tin where other vows live. The clock took a breath and offered its next second. I answered by setting down the pen. I turned the lamp 1 notch lower so the room could see its own edges. Beyond the glass, the streetlight cupped the rain like a palm. I wrapped the blanket over my knees and let my heels find the rhythm of the floor. When worry knocked, I sent it to the night kit to read the breathing card aloud. Stillness is not a cure, but it is a place to stand. I stood in it, sitting down, the way farmers rest while their fields keep being faithful in the dark. At dawn, I set 1 bowl. It was enough. Morning put its hand on my shoulder and said, "Now." I answered with calls. First, the doctor. Calendar printed. Start date today. Weekly check-ins, then by week. Put it in writing. He did. I heard the click of the date stamp like a choir's first inhale. Then the pharmacist. Stabilize brand. Smallest available dose for taper math. Print the manufacturer sheet. No substitutions without my consent. Understood, he said, and the printer obeyed. Then Elaine, bring your folder and that pen that scares sloppy notes into straight lines. Already in my purse, she said. I labeled the pill organizer with squares that behaved. Morn light, walk yes, noon water, even page bed. The alarm on my phone shed its midnight costume and put on a daytime job wake time fixed. Sunlight appointment, no screens after 9. I reset the bedroom to cool, dark, quiet, and moved the radio to the hallway like a chatty aunt who talks through prayers. I dressed like a person who intends to be believed. Good shoes, honest sweater, hair pinned where thoughts can't tangle it. At the clinic, I hand-delivered consent forms and signed 4 copies. Each page stamped like bread loaves that rose as they should. At the pharmacy, I asked for a plain language receipt and a note in my profile. Patient declines, nighttime changes. Contact during daylight only. Back home, I taped the plan to the fridge, kissed my fingers, and pressed them to the paper the way my mother blessed pies. The bottle sat on the high shelf with its daylight decides sash. For the first time in a long time, I felt not smaller than it, but taller than the hour. When the clinic portal tried its little Serranura refill, is ready for 1-click convenience, I clicked print instead. Copy for me, copy for Elaine, copy for the future, who likes to be consulted. The house approved in small ways, light pooling, on the table like permission, kettle humming yes in a minor key. By noon, the bridge between talk and action had a floor. Appointments on paper, labels I could pronounce, people whose names would answer. The boundary didn't stand between us anymore. It became a bridge we could walk together without hurrying. They said, tonight or never. I said, today by my terms. The conference room had a window large enough to keep secrets honest. I placed my timeline on the table. Renewals, brand swaps. The month fog leaned its elbow on my mornings. The physician sat across, sleeves rolled. The pharmacist arranged pens like tools. The clinic manager brought policies that thought they were laws. Elaine set her folder down like a bell that calls people to attention. I began the way our union steward taught us, dates first, feelings later. Here, I said, tapping, is the shift from as needed to nightly with no fresh consent. Here is the manufacturer change that coincides with my falls and fog. Here is the voicemail suggesting a taper someday, while the label commanded tonight. I slid the side effect diary forward. These are the stairs I missed. This is the coffee I salted. These are the mornings I paid fog-like rent. Then, I spoke my demands, steady as a plumb line. Assumed gives, documented. No more renewals by drift. Informed consent for any change, Appeal restored if I say no. Clean routing. A. Transparent taper. Plan written schedule. Lawful pace. Weekly check-ins. Printouts. Every time. B. An optional support trust if I ever purchase. Paid sleep aids. 2 cosigners. Receipts. Quarterly summaries to keep temptation from calling itself mercy. C. Ban on auto-renewals without fresh consent. Written apology to patients whose renewals drifted without fresh consent. And a public patient notice education on taper rights. No shaming for asking. The manager cleared her throat. We've followed standard practice. Standard practice is how fields erode, I said, not unkind. We're building terraces. The physician lifted my hypnogram. She's right, he said, voice soft but with a spine. This became maintenance without a conversation. He signed the top of the taper plan and dated it big enough for old eyes. The pharmacist nodded. We'll stabilize formulation, print lot numbers, and add a hard stop. No nighttime substitutions. He wrote it on a bright sheet, the kind you can't pretend you didn't see. From the corner, a voice I didn't expect, the tech who had checked me out a dozen times, asked to speak. She introduced herself and the shadow she had been working under. I'm a single mom, she said, hands folded to keep from apologizing for existing. I've been quietly flagging her refills to prevent overlaps when the system wanted to auto-push them. It wasn't policy. It was conscience. I could get written up. She looked at me like a person who has been carrying a secret uphill. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Thank you, I said, because gratitude is a tool to. Elaine wrote her name down with a border like a ribbon. The manager adjusted her stack of papers, which is what people do when their stack of answers is shorter than their stack of policies. We can note this quietly, she offered. Update the file, move forward. Publicly, I answered, and set my finger on the place where shame likes to breed. A notice on the portal. A flyer by the window. Words big enough for grandmothers. The physician spoke first again. Publicly, he agreed. The pharmacist followed. The manager exhaled. The sound a policy makes when it remembers it belongs to people. She signed the apology draft and the patient rights notice. The text smiled like a person who just set down a heavy box. We initialed the taper schedule. We dated the check-ins. We printed the plan and handed copies around the table until paper turned strangers into a team. Elaine stacked my copies so the staples lined up like a small picket fence. Looks like a yard we can live in, she said. Outside the big window, the afternoon remembered how to be kind to glass. Inside, we rearranged chairs, shook hands that meant something, and gathered pens that had earned a rest. We can note this quietly, or publish the policy, they had said. Publicly, I answered. Then, the room agreed. The notice went up by the pharmacy window in letters that didn't flinch. No auto-renewal without fresh consent. Ask about taper education. The clinic portal posted a patient rights sheet with checkboxes that liked being checked. The pharmacist started stapling plain language notes to receipt slot number. Brand. What changed? Who changed it? Why? Weeks passed and paid me back in small coins. Clearer mornings, where coffee tasted like itself and stairs remembered they were stairs. Surer, steps, hips that didn't audition for a fall with every turn. Laughter that didn't yawn in the middle like a door someone forgot to oil. I noticed the iris bed needed weeding and had the energy to stoop. I opened mail the day it arrived. I sang Harmony by accident. I fixed the loose porch stair with 2 screws and a promise to stop pretending we don't all need tightening from time to time. I set red-tipped tulips in a jar and watched them behave themselves in water. I sent a small donation to the library earmarked Quiet Corners, because there's a table in the back where people like me read papers that tell the truth. Elaine and I met each week to draw X's through the taper squares. Some days I wanted to celebrate with fanfare. Most days I just wanted a good sandwich and a nap that belonged to me, not chemistry. The support trust form went in the file unused, but present, like an umbrella that keeps rain honest by existing. At home, the second cup stopped sulking in the cupboard. I decide when it sits on the table. Some evenings it's tea. Some evenings it's empty on purpose. A small altar to enough. A card arrived from the pharmacy tech, a doodle of a lighthouse, and the words, "Thank you for asking out loud." Later, a note from a stranger. I brought your flyer to my mother. She slept for 2 hours in the afternoon sun and didn't apologize once. I pinned both to the corkboard. Under Daylight Decides, a family of sentences that keep the room company. I still have nights where the ceiling practices geography. When that happens, I take my night kit to the window and let the breathing card count for me until I can count for myself. I keep my plan on the fridge, copies in the folder, names in my phone. I keep the apology letter from the clinic in a page protector, not to wave, just to remember what daylight can persuade. Then, one afternoon, the mail brought a small envelope I didn't recognize. Inside, a sticky note with 2 words, "Thank you." No return address. I set it by the lamp where a different kind of prayer keeps its seat. A note arrived later this time thanking me for sleeping. "If you're still with me, listen close. This is the part I wish someone had told me before the first label learned to say nightly. Boundaries protect love. They do not put love out on the porch. They build doorframes so love knows how to enter and how to stay. My doorframe is for boards. Daylight decides. Read twice. Speak plain. Get copies. Grace needs structure. A hug is warmer when the house isn't on fire. That's why we write plans, ask for receipts, and invite witnesses. It isn't suspicion. It's care shaped like paper. Patience plus persistence win. Not thunder, not threats, quiet repetition. Wake the same time, stand in the sun, put the bottle on the high shelf and your name on the plan. Breathe the way the card says, even when you think you know better. You don't. It does. My kind of Americanness is simple. Neighbors who witnessed, clerks who print truth big enough for elders, clinics that correct themselves in public, rules that hold even when nobody is clapping. We aren't perfect. We are fixable. If your night is loud, here is my toolbox. 2 signatures on big changes. Receipts you can read without your glasses. Written plans with dates and names. Check-ins that happen on Tuesdays even when it rains. Put your phone face down after 9. Put your hope face up every morning. I'm not offering heroics. I'm offering habits. They are sturdy, they are teachable, and they belong to you. Tell me in the comments, where did you learn to wait with courage, especially at 3 a.m.? Was it a porch swing, a church pew, a bus stop, a hospital chair? Put the place in your sentence so someone else can borrow it tonight. There's another night this table remembers want to hear it this evening. By the weekend, the comments stopped whispering and started helping. I asked my doctor for copies. One said, "My daughter printed the taper guide." Another wrote, signing it with a heart that didn't feel like candy but like resolve. The church bulletin tucked a line beneath the birthdays. Persistence with grace, and no one rolled their eyes. The clinic taped up a patient write sheet. The cashier at the corner store slid my receipt over with a note, "Proud of you, ma'am." At the pharmacy window, a teenager read the flyer out loud to her grandmother, and then read it again, slower, because dignity is bilingual. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez waved a chamomile bag like a flag of truce. "I'll bring cookies instead," she called, and I saluted with my spoon. A message arrived from a neighbor I only wave at, starting my supervised taper. "Your line daylight decides lives on my fridge now." I set my palm on the paper where mine lives and felt less alone. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Evening returns in its softer suit. The bottle is off the table, demoted to the high shelf where it minds its manners. The plan stands on the fridge, corners taped, dates checked. I set 1 cup. The second waits in the cupboard, available by choice, not demand. The window holds a kind blue. The porch light glows like a welcome sign that spells my name correctly. I turn my phone face down and let silence keep the first watch. The house knows its lullaby, no refrigerator in B flat, clock in quarter notes, me on harmony when I remember. Sleep doesn't knock, it arrives, not proud, just timely, like a friend who learned where the key is. Before I go, I press 2 fingers to the taper calendar and bless the squares we have crossed off. I place the night kit by the window, not as a threat but as a promise. I open the window a finger's width so that dark can bring good air and leave bad notions on the sill. Tonight, I'll tell you about the lullaby I almost forgot how a melody found me when the bottle didn't. If this steadied your hands, subscribe, like, and share. I post new grandma stories every morning and evening, because some nights are long and some mornings need hope. We keep our voices low and our paperwork clear. Next episode, the night I taught my house to sleep. A simple routine that turned 4 walls into a lullaby. Bring your cup, bring your name, bring your calm. If this steadied you, meet me again twice daily. Subscribe, new stories, morning and evening. Thank you. Keep your receipts. Keep your dignity. Let daylight decide.